The NHS was set up in 1948 and it superseded a system of health insurance and charity. And it was set up as a dividend really from the war years for when for all the privations people had to face in the 1930s and during the war and the bombing and so forth. And the Tory party were against setting it up, but the Labour government brought the NHS about in 1948.
The NHS is now a very complicated structure, and a lot of the services have been outsourced to the private sector, and that's the main way in which the profit is being accrued at the moment. For instance, Care UK has a private hospital, BMI's Falcon Manor, another private hospital. A lot of their income depends upon NHS patients. They're referred from the NHS, NHS pays for their care. But they're pretty strict about who they'll take on. They don't want anybody who's likely not to be ready to be discharged as soon as possible. And so they don't have on-call staff, doctors, crash teams, cardiac arrest teams on the premises. They don't have intensive care units. So anybody who might require those services goes to the NHS. Guess what? The NHS and the private sector get paid exactly the same amount for the care for each individual patient. Should anything go wrong in the private sector, where do the patients go? Guess what? It's an ambulance and off to the NHS. So they're not really they're not doing the full job, they're only doing the profitable bit.
I think when I see this particular picture, Serco headquarters, I think every time they apply for a contract, they have to factor in the cost of this building, the cost of the people who work here, and the cost of dividends that go to shareholders every year before they even think about how much they're going to pay their staff and how much they're going to spend on facilities.
This important exhibition is a reminder, if we needed one, of what a disaster privatisation of the NHS is. It's a disaster for the staff who work in the NHS, for patients and their carers, and for all of us as citizens of this country.
Circle Healthcare was the first company to take over a whole NHS hospital, and they promised great things about saving costs. In the end, when they failed to make a profit out of it and had run up debts, they handed it back to the state sector.
So we have to think about what we can do about it. Obviously the first thing I'd always say is vote wisely, but don't leave it to the politicians. It's worth remembering that there's 170 MPs sitting in Parliament with vested interests in private healthcare companies. They are not there as a benevolent state. They are not there to look after you. They are there to look after themselves. So when Nia Bevan said that the NHS would only survive if there's people there who are willing to fight for it, that means you and me. That means us standing outside these places, every cut, every closure, protesting, making sure our voices are heard, because it's the only way you're actually going to keep your NHS.